Hello everyone. I am Raghav from the team of GISA Council. I welcome you all to the webinar for BCP/DR Audit Masterclass Evidence Testing and Real World Red Flags webinar conducted by GISA Council. It is a not-for-profit organization committed to empowering individuals and organizations through specialized training and globally recognized certifications. Our mission is to strengthen the cybersecurity and IT governance ecosystem by building skilled professionals through programs such as Associate Information Systems Auditor, CISA, CISM, ISO, IEC 27001-2022 Lead Auditor, CISSP Prep Training, GDPR Specialist, and many more. Please note that our team will share the Google Form link for claiming CP certificate approximately 10-15 minutes before the session concludes. It is mandatory to complete and submit this form in order to receive your CP certificate. Now, it is my privilege to introduce Mr. Yagneshwar Iyer, a distinguished professional with over 30 years of experience in cybersecurity and IT governance. He holds certifications including CISA, CISM, and CDPAC, and has served in leadership roles such as CIO, CTO, and CISO. We look forward to gaining valuable sights from his vast expertise. Best wishes to all the participants. Sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghav. Thank you so much, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. You guys, how many of you have been here to the last few sessions? Anyone's been here? Any repeat attendees here? If you've been here for the last couple of sessions, you might remember that we've been focusing in these webinars on a few areas, and I've been trying to share my own experiences of being a person who implemented those systems and also then a person who audited the implementation of those governance and management systems. So today, as part of that, we did many industries. We did some industry specific work, earlier, and now we're looking at a more generalized topic today on how to audit. And this is how to audit. Okay, this is not how to set up a business continuity, only to audit, right? Most of us are focused on becoming auditors here, which is why we are here. As you also know, most of you might be aware, GISA Council also conducts, courses that help you with knowledge to gain certifications, and this is part of our initiative to introduce you to how we take you through the CISA course material. I've been teaching CISA for about 12 years now, the CISA review course, and it's a 40-hour course. We'll quickly speak about it. I think it's the starting date is also there, 12th or 13th of March. It starts. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is some kind of a practical toolkit for auditors on how to test, what evidence to ask the auditee company to check if BCP, business continuity planning or policy, and disaster recovery planning or policy is actually an effective exercise in that organization, or it is just a document which may not actually work when the planned for disaster strikes. Okay, so we also look for what are the kind of tests that need to be done by us as auditors and by auditees. We look at what evidences to ask for and what kind of red flag indicators that you can find and look for in BCP DR audits. This is for IT auditors and professionals training to become IT auditors in any industry or organization size. This today is industry agnostic. This should apply to almost all industries that I've tried to formulate this presentation in a way that's not industry specific. I also tried to format every section as a practical checklist or template that you can apply in your next BCP or DR or overall audit engagement. My wife is kindly telling me that my dinner is here. Okay, so what we will cover is we'll look at we'll of course try and walk through the full audit cycle of BCP and DR, from identifying the scope to submitting your report on how effective the BCP or DR is. hopefully in a logical and in a field ready sequence. Field ready is when how to actually do it when you are going to a company. Okay. We look at key definitions. What are those regulatory drivers and audit objectives every auditor must know before entering the field of auditing BCP and DR? We learn how to identify critical systems. Now, what are critical systems? Any organization will have many systems, processes, systems. Systems is a word that encompasses hardware, software, knowledge, skills, processes, facilities, um, uh, and any other partners outside, vendors, customers, partners, all of them are included in the word systems. Now, as you know, many companies outsource a lot of their internal processes to external companies. So some of them can also be critical. Now, how do you define what is critical? This is a topic that I spend a lot of time when I teach my CISA review courses, because this is not only important for us auditors, this is important enough for us in life. Generally, is that criticality is established by the impact on business of any risk event that you might be, or your information assets or your systems might be exposed to. Sorry, I'm a little wheezy and slow today. I'm kind of got a cold and not really well. Okay, so if I take a brief pause once in a while, please pardon me in advance. Um, okay, we'll also try to see which documents to request. Now, these documents to request, I must tell you, is a little generalized, and we'll try and identify where there might be certain differences in what you might find. But as I'd like to, always emphasize, learning principles will ensure that specifics are also covered, right? If I were to focus more on specifics, they'll say, but I here said apple, but I'm finding orange, right? So what I try to do is I try to tell you fruit, so then apple is also a fruit, orange is also a fruit. So that is typically the focus of how I teach these sessions. So you can you get an idea of how I might approach the CISA session also. We look at how walkthroughs are nothing but you're telling the auditor, show me how it works, right? Show me what it does. Like a demonstration demo. Tabletop exercises are simply when you're sitting down in a place talking to each other. You're not actually, it's not a simulation. You're just talking and trying to understand if everybody knows what they will do in case some disaster happens. Failover tests are another thing where you actually simulate something actually going wrong, and then you try and see if the processes are working in place. Like, for example, when you have fire drills. In fire drills, you're not actually setting fire to your office, right? You just sound the alarm, and then you ensure that the sprinkler system doesn't start throwing water on everything in the office, and then you see how people react and what people do. Then we'll see how to rate gaps that are missing, that are the shortcomings of the business continuity or the disaster recovery plan, and how to address and how to communicate those results to management. Always remember the golden rule of any audit report, whether it is BCP or anything, is that it should be in a language that management or senior leadership can understand, right? Technical jargon is to be avoided. You can back up your recommendation, observation, suggestion with technical evidence, but however, you should explain all of your observations in business terms. And it could have this impact on business. This is a risk. It could have this impact. If you employ someone under 18 years of age, right? Say the HR head, CEO, board of directors will be sent to jail. That language everybody will understand. Now, business continuity plan is a plan that focuses on keeping critical. Again, critical is based on business impact analysis. What can happen if there is a fire to my building? If my main ERP fails, right? How do I switch to a backup, right? What are those processes that are critical for me to keep those are critical, those are important. So obviously in the phase of a disaster, you should focus on those systems which will have maximum impact on the business. More maximum resources should be spent on that. time, effort, labor plan should be spent on those that will have maximum impact, and then you work your way down. A disaster recovery plan restores IT systems and data after a failure. Okay, so restoration to a working state versus keeping something working while that restoration is happening. That is kind of the difference between a disaster recovery plan and a business continuity plan. Business continuity plan says, how do I keep my critical systems working? Even it may be a lesser capacity. Disaster recovery says, how do I recover from something, a risk event that happens? Recovery time is maximal, max. Recovery time, RTO, is max acceptable downtime for each system. That it should, any system, if it goes down in a particular way, it should be back in a particular amount of time. Recovery point objective is how much data can I afford to lose that I will need to recreate. Right? Some companies, for some systems will say, I don't have too many transactions, I can recreate every 24 hours. But imagine a stock market. A stock market could have millions of transactions every hour. So, if you say 1 hour is my recovery point, then you can't recreate a million transactions. So in the stock market, your recovery time might be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever is technically possible. Mostly there is nothing that is absolutely instantaneous. There will be a switchover time. Maybe it is milliseconds, but even millisecond could mean that you lose a few transactions. Okay, so remember that. Business impact analysis, BIA, identifies criticality and recovery priorities, is what I said to you in even the earlier slide. Maximum tolerance outage is with a point beyond which the business cannot recover, it will die. Why should we care? As auditors and as auditees, there are many regulations that mandate that a BCP plan should be, a BCP/DR should be formed, created, formulated, and it should be disseminated across the organization, and it should be tested to ensure that if the disaster happens, that plan will work, it will be effective, it will deliver the expected results. What I like to call it is a plan that is not effective, right? It's just not on paper, but it also proves by testing that will actually help the business with manage that risk event and reduce the impact of that risk. A board level risk is unplanned outages could cost millions or per hour, per day. If your factory doesn't work for 1 hour, that result of that could be in millions. If your ERP goes on for 1 hour, right, it could have millions in result. It need not always be money. It could be something you say, listen, I can't have this going down. I can't really calculate the money result of this. I'll give you an example. There's always a big story where an automobile manufacturer in India had some problem on one computer in the gate, and for some reason it took some time to fix it, some 3-4 hours to fix one computer at the gate. Now that is the story, is that it resulted in a 3 or 4 kilometer long line of trucks which stood on the national highway to, because the trucks are continuously coming in, and the speed at which they could perform intake of those trucks reduced by what, I don't know, they had 10 computers, one went down, it went down by 10%, and that formed a 3-4 hour line outside the factory on the national highway. Then what happens? Can you put a value to it? Maybe not, but do you want that kind of a delay? That is not. Then you'll say, listen, this is critical enough for me to ensure that if that one computer at the gate goes down, I should be able to restore it within 30 minutes or 1 hour, not 2-3 days. Plans that are never tested are assumptions, they are not controls. What we want is effective controls, not assumption that it may work. What are typical audit objectives of any BCP or DR audit? Are plans documented, approved, and current? All three, if you see, are important, because if it's not documented, it becomes difficult to consistently implement as a repeatable, measurable, improvable process. That is the advantage of documentation. Documentation is not something to give to auditors so that they can tick mark in an Excel sheet. The right documentation which has all the right contents, will help make that process an effective control that is repeatable, that can be monitored and measured, and therefore can be improved. What can be measured will only what is measured will be improved. What cannot be measured cannot be improved. Okay. Also, our objective as auditors should be to see if recovery objectives align with business requirements. If your business continued disaster recovery plan says if the ERP goes down, I don't mind waiting for 2 days. But what is the impact of those 2 days the ERP being going down? Is the RTO and the RPO in the disaster recovery plan, is it appropriate for the organization? On what basis have those parameters been established in the documentation, in the plan, even if it is approved by senior leadership? Remember, don't always assume that senior leadership has understood the impacts properly, or they have been explained, or maybe they just signed because the teams below them have said this is fine. They may not have understood it. So you as auditor owe it to the sponsor of the audit to study and ensure that the BCP plan is in line with business requirements. Then we have to check if plans are actually tested. I've spoken about this. I won't labor this point. And are gaps tracked and remediated? Now, there's another thing which I emphasize in my CISA course is that as auditors, we are not looking for perfection. We should not look for perfection. We should look for improvement. Of course, we can't say that, you improve in a way that you take 10 years to fix something or 15 years. That improvement should also be reasonable. You all have heard of SMART goals, right? A specific, measurable. A stands for what in SMART? Anyone?
Achievable.
Achievable. Yeah, correct. And R stands for
Realistic.
realistic, and T is time bound, right? So even improvements to your plan should also be SMART, SMART. Thank you for that intervention. I'm not able to think so much today. Little. In fact, this is not true. It is not true. I almost always forget that A for some reason. Okay, how do you scope? Yes,
My pleasure.
thank you, sir. Very kind of you. So what auditors tend to do is, oh, give me the document, give me the approved policy, right? That's what most of us do. But before you do that, understand the business. Understanding the business is very important. You should know, and as you do your practice, as you get deeper into this as a habit, you will have a basic understanding. If a car manufacturer, if I tell you a car manufacturer, most of us can think, okay, there'll be components, they'll be putting it together, there'll be, the whole frame, there'll be an engine, there'll be a gearbox, there'll be seats, there'll be steering, there'll be windshields, there'll be the body panels, somebody will have to paint it. You can understand that, right? You understand the business. Now you know that at least that these things have to be put together somehow. There'll be an assembly line, maybe those components may be bought from external parties. You have a basic understanding of those. So understand those businesses, how they work. Take a tour of the business. Talk to people. Spend that 2-3 hours understanding, or maybe one day understanding what the business is, so that you understand what are those critical parts of the business which might be most affected and can cause maximum damage if they go down in a disaster. Right? That's why I said tier 1 or mission critical, without which the company will really suffer. Confirm with business process owners, not just IT. Okay, BCP and DRP are typically relegated to IT and facility management, and HR sometimes to help with people. But the people who are really affected are business owners, because they have to run those processes. Include third-party cloud services that support critical processes as well. So a manufacturing company like an auto manufacturer or a car manufacturer most probably depends on many other vendors for supply. Those vendors, now if there is an engine vendor, if there is a vendor who supplies engines, what is the business continuity of that vendor itself? Should have a basic understanding, right? The organization should have a basic understanding. With COVID, most of us now have, at least I have, the concept of this terminology of supply chain risks has come into my own vocabulary. And a lot of people, when I speak to them, they agree that, listen, we really did think of supply chain risks as a factor. Yes, they would be capacity constraints, right? And we may have to have one or two vendors as backups, but now geographical constraints have got added, logistical constraints have got added. Is that the currently the Strait of Hormuz is closed by Iran? I'm saying any ships pass through it, and we are going to set fire to those ships. This is the news I read today. So what happens to the companies which are depending on the Strait of Hormuz for their parts to come, for their goods to come, or what as the case may be, right? Now, what is the now at a country level? If you can think that oil supply, petroleum or crude oil supply might become a big issue now. So people might be working on finding alternatives. So do you have plans for that? Now, as we learn, as I said before pandemic, nobody thought, oh, China will close, they won't get, what do you do now? People are thinking along those lines, right? So that's an additional vector that we have added to our disaster recovery or business continuity planning. Right? So third-party cloud services are very important to consider. Understand if RTO and RPO are validated by businesses and not just set by IT. IT might say, oh, ERP one day can go down, but talk to the finance people, talk to purchase, talk to sales, talk to all the main users of the ERP. For example, understand, listen, are you happy if your ERP goes on for 24 hours? How many transactions do you have? How will you recreate it? Do you have an understanding of that? Learn from actual users what the impact on business of those critical systems might be. See if they reflect current business requirement and not last year's. Businesses grow. Okay, are they technically achievable with the current infrastructure? Because many business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans are created but are not supported with resources. Now, if you have to create a second copy of your ERP, it is going to cost you. There'll be license costs, there'll be infrastructure costs, hardware costs, or cloud infrastructure costs, as the case may be. Senior leadership has to budget for that, has to give resources, right? Sometimes when you want second copies, the infrastructure itself gets complicated. You might need other infrastructure components, not just the software licenses. You will need storage, you will need database licenses, you will need compute hardware server licenses, operating system licenses, network architecture will change. And all that has to be taken into account. And for that, you will need resources. So the business has to support the DRP and BCP plan with those. So the infrastructure should also support. Before you start your audit, understand what the perimeter of the audit. Perimeter is a boundary around the audit which you have to focus on. List all the in-scope systems for the. Now you may be asked to audit the BCP DRP capability of a particular system only and not of the whole organization. Or you may be asked to audit the whole organization's BCP or couple of systems. So understand that and find out what all systems affect the scope of your audit and then start asking for relevant information. Note what is explicitly out of scope and why, and make sure that the auditee understands the exception and agrees with it. That is also very important. Excuse me, guys. Sorry. I'm sorry for that. Sorry to blow my nose into your ears. I mean, not literally, but digitally. Sorry. Uh, okay. Flag, most important, right? Any policy in any organization is part of a governance framework, and that includes the BCP or DRP policy. The governance framework has two or three components. The top level component is the law of the land, the regulation. The second is any standard or any framework that you may have adopted, which needs, for example, certification or like ISO 27001, 2022, or an industry standard like PCI DSS, and then your own organizational policies. Now, why do you have policies when you have these standards? Is because these standards are generic. You have to adapt the principles of that standard to your own organization. That's why you have this three tiers: regulation, any standards that you have adopted, and your own policy. So understand that any regulations that apply, they are primary. You cannot, say, oh, I can take the risk. It's okay, right? I mean, You really can't do that. If you there are clear penalties in law if you don't adhere to those regulations. So please always flag them, look out for them. You may need, as an auditor, like I am not a legal, I don't understand regulations. I may need the help of a legal or advisor, counsel to tell me what regulations apply and what I should look for. Okay, so be open to asking for advice which in those areas which are not your core expertise, and that's not legal, even technical expertise. You may need to look for a person like me. Oh, let me take a year on this because I need technical advice. Okay, that's just an example. You can take anyone who's competent, guys. If no business impact analysis exists or it is more than 2 years old, that is your first finding. A current business impact analysis is the foundation of any credible BCP or DR program. I hope you understood it and you will agree with me. Okay. 14th March to 12th April is our next CISA prep training. If I'm at the current state, I think the question to answer is, will I be alive for it? But hopefully I will be. We have 40 hours. We do this India Standard Time, Saturday and Sunday, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And I try to again give you examples from my practical life. There are discounted exam vouchers. You can connect with Raghav or GISA Council. The email addresses and the websites are given here. Please contact them. And I also give you access to my own website where there are, I think, 600, 700 questions. I'll also be adding another 1,000 questions for the CISA exam. If they are in MCQ format, and then it tells you which questions you got right, which questions you got wrong. The ones you got wrong, the platform tells you what the reason for the right answer and all that. So standard MCQ, you can join us here, and we have a thanks to the effort of all the participants, very high success rates of certification in the CISA course exams, in the CISA exam after the people have attended our course. We also have a very wide range of positive feedback from our participants, which Raghav and GISA Council can share with anyone who's interested. So I look forward to seeing you in the CISA prep training. Okay, this is a list. I'm not sure if this will be shared with you, so you can take a screenshot. There's a good reference that I have used in my own audits. What documents to look for, or to ask the auditee for. What are you looking for in those documents? And what are those conditions that you should look for to red flag it? So, for example, if business impact analysis document is missing or is 2 years old, or it doesn't have the RTO and RPO defined for the right systems, or it doesn't have financial impact estimates or criticality ratings, like I mentioned, not everything may have a number attachable to it. Right, red flag it if it is older than 24 months or never been reviewed by business owners. If you take it to a business owner, if it exists, you take it to a business owner, you say, I have no idea what are you showing me? Please explain this to me. If that is a feedback you get, then that document has not been created with the business owner's involvement. That could be process owners. Now, you might very well say, but they might change. If they change, if let's say the process owner or business owner changes, obviously there has to be an HR-led process where that person is taken through all the policies, right? And that business continuity policy is part of those policies which that person is expected or should understand, because he's also the business owner, process owner is as responsible for effective BCP or DR as the IT or other teams are. Right? Ask for a full plan document which should have step-by-step recovery procedures. Roles. The roles are who will do what and contact lists. And one of the most important things you have to understand with these kind of documents is that you should have a copy off-site somewhere. A secure copy off-site. Why secure and why off-site is that, let's say something happens to your building and all your documentation is there, you won't be able to access it. Right? And why secure? It should be secure. It should be accessible only to identified, authorized people, because it will have a lot of information about internal systems. So it should not fall into the wrong hands, because if it falls into the wrong hands, then a lot of information about your internal systems processes could leak, could be misused against you by malicious actors. It could also fall into the hands of the competition who may understand what systems you are running. Okay. Look for a generic template with organization name pasted in which is not connected to the systems in the organization. Ask for test or exercise reports, maybe for the last 3 years or since the BCP plan was formulated. What are you looking for? What is the scope of the BCP plan? What are the results of the tests? What were the issues found? What were the remediation status? Were they followed up? Were there changes to the plan based on the test or exercises, business continuity or disaster recovery drills done? What we advise is that whenever you're doing a business continuity drill or a disaster recovery drill, have one person in the role of an observer. An observer is looking for what goes wrong in the response of the people who are responding to the disaster or who are managing business continuity, right? And then make notes, right? Do a post-test review meeting, and then see, oh, we can improve, this, we can improve this, we can improve this. Make a note of that in your post-implementation review, and then maybe implement that in the next test. And if you see improvement in the next test, make that part of your document. Okay, you may not want to make it part of your main procedure document for your disaster recovery unless you have tested your improvements. Okay, if there are no test records or only tabletop exercises have been done with no technical test, that's also a red flag. We look at what those exercises are briefly. Ask for plan approval and review history. Plan approvals may come in the form of either signatures on documents or email approvals. Ask for them. They should be maintained. Okay. This was said, sign off by senior management and an annual review cycle. Now, while we recommend an annual review cycle because businesses change, right? The regulatory environment changes, businesses change, business processes change, competition, which causes you to change, technology change will cause you to change. So all these can affect the way your business works. So at least an annual review. However, there might be other major events that might happen. You may have implemented a new system that will also require review of the business continuity plan. There may be a merger and acquisition that will require a revisit of the business continuity plan. You may shut down a division, hopefully not. Then that may require the revisit of a business continuity plan. Okay. All right. Now, if you have a second recovery site, ask for the contract. See what you are allowed to do. I had a case where there was an organization which worked round the clock, and the recovery site would get logged at 9:30 p.m. or 10 p.m. or something, and it would only open at 8 a.m. the next day, right? And I honestly did not spot this in that document. The IT person said, "Sir, this." I said, "Yeah, this is not right. What if you have a disaster at 9 and you have to shift to that location?" Said, "We can't because the building is locked, and we wanted a different building, but we had already set it up. There's no cost. We don't know what to do." So I said, "Okay." So I also use my audit, to tell IT, is there anything that you would like me to include in your report that will help you? Because the point of an audit is to be helpful to the teams that you are auditing. It's not to find faults. Help the companies improve is why we are audit, or we perform audits. Okay. Employee awareness and training records is very important. Who is to do what? If you see the roles in the earlier row, who should do what? Why do we have this? What is the impact on business? What is your role? How should you respond? Who should you call? Who should you escalate it to? Are all important parts of a business continuity plan. Any disaster should be a shock. It should not be a shock. It should be a habit, which is why companies conduct fire drills. Okay, because so that if when there is a fire, and typically it is not if, it is when, people know what to do, right? And in any disaster, I don't think I've mentioned it here, IT disasters or other natural disasters or man-made disasters. Remember one important thing, your focus completely and totally should be only on first and foremost protecting human life. All these business continuity, disaster recovery plans, their first focus should be to protect and save human lives. Technology systems, infrastructure, everything comes later. Okay, please remember that. How do you spot a plan that's only on paper? It's never been tested. It is out.
Sir, can you explain the third one from the bottom in the previous slide?
Okay. I had mentioned this a little while ago in my intro thing, if you remember, when we were speaking of, say, the car manufacturer who buys components from a third party. Yeah. What happens? What is the disaster recovery capability of that third party? How is that third party's sub, uh, eh, whatever the third party does for the auditing? How critical is it? What what if that third party or vendor has a disaster? Like, and I mentioned COVID in the case, China being the factory of the world, right? And a lot of companies got affected. Yes, a lot of companies did not get their goods because China wasn't shipping anything. Now, I give you the example of the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran says they will set fire to any ships that pass. Which companies get their goods or their components through the Strait of Hormuz? Then what happens to that? So your vendor's capability to keep performing the service or supplying the goods to you is also important for you when you audit a company's disaster recovery, because the disaster may not happen in your own systems or facilities. It may happen at a vendor's. But remember that a vendor is only an extension of your process. You have outsourced your process to a vendor. The risk of that process still is yours. If that vendor doesn't have proper disaster recovery or business continuity, that will affect you. How do companies manage this? They spread their risk across multiple vendors. Now, what are people doing? They're saying, listen, just having multiple vendors around China is not enough. Let's go to Vietnam. Let's go to India. Let's have a couple of vendors there. If something happens in China or Vietnam or India, at least we will not be at 100% loss. Maybe we'll be at a 70% loss, but at least some business continuity can happen. That is what that means. And I hope you're able to relate that to the earlier, I mentioned in the one of the earlier slides. Does it make sense, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
No problem.
Sir, can I come in?
Please,
Uh,
please.
uh,
Every time you ask a question, right, please understand that I am grateful for the rest.
Thank you. Sir, I was just thinking of the situation like you are highlighting Strait of Hormuz. For India and the world, which is 20% dependent. So India is
Yeah,
also dependent. But India has an alternative source, that's the Russian oil, which
yeah,
Trump said you can't take. So India
yeah,
can now utilize that to fill the supply chain disruption which is happening due to Strait of Hormuz.
yeah. So, yeah, sure. Way beyond my pay scale, honestly. Yeah. So there are too many pulls and pushes, but yeah, the effective concept, what we are saying is that we are buying stuff. All organizations are buying stuff, getting processes. Many companies say in Europe and in US outsource their IT management to people in India. Right? There are so many global capability centers, GCCs, supposedly around 3,000 and growing. A few every month in India. Now, all those guys are running the processes which earlier used to run in those countries. Now, what happens if the undersea cable goes down? All their work is depend on the internet, right? What if India suddenly blocks? Do you know that Indian government has blocked access to this platform called Superbase? Supabase. Superbase is a mobile app backend. It's also used for web apps, but generally it's called as a backend as a service, BAS, BAAS. It's been blocked. God knows why. I haven't been able to find any reason why Government of India has blocked Superbase. You can look it up. Superbase has been blocked. I had a few applications. Thankfully, they were not in production. They were in testing. And I had an alternative also on my own in my own on my own database, which I was moving to, because Superbase costs money and these applications were not something I was willing to spend money on. So I had a backup there. But what if something like this happens? What is your alternative? Have you considered the possibility? Now, whenever you consider any risk, remember that a risk is not standalone. A risk has to be combined with the probability of that risk event happening. Now, if you are in Tokyo, the probability of an earthquake is higher than if you are in Mumbai, India, right? Because Tokyo lies apparently on the fault line, or if you are in California, which is there on the fault line, right? I think the west coast of US is on a major fault line. So you will have to provide for earthquakes there. Or let's say the west coast of America provides for hurricanes, or the east coast of India provides for hurricanes or cyclones, or as I don't know what the case may be. So those kind of provision, those you have to take into account the probability of that risk event happening based on your environment. The probability and the risk. So risk will apply to almost all businesses. Okay, the earthquake risk applies to all businesses. You can have an earthquake anywhere, you can't predict it. But what is the probability? And how do you base the probability on? On historical evidence, right? If you have never had, a typhoon or a hurricane bringing down your infrastructure, or a flood, or never had. Now, the Middle East, for example, Middle East countries providing for snow or water flooding on their streets would be a little too much. It probably happens now, once in 5 years or once in 10 years. They may not provide for it. But a city like Mumbai, which gets rain about 5 months a year, not providing for rain damage or flooding would be dumb. So risk events plus probability is what you have to look for, okay? Again, no business ownership, only IT is formulating the plan. IT is deciding which systems are critical enough that they will be required to work during a disaster, should continue to work even at a slightly lesser capability or ability or capacity. But business owners have to approve it. They have to understand what can happen to their work. Ultimately, it's not IT, but the business owners, the process owners, data owners who are delivering the service to the business to keep that business running. IT is a strategic partner, is an enabler, yes, but the people doing the work know what the actual impact is. So when you figure out that the business owners don't know, that is a red flag for us. If you find that they are doing their testing, right, but they are not reviewing how the tests were, how the test happened, how they ran, how they worked, and they are not finding any improvement. No plan is ever perfect because the goalpost is not fixed. The goalpost, which is the organization, the enterprise, or the company, or the auditee, is continuously changing. Right? As I said, I gave you 4 examples: technology, internal process, regulation, competition, all that can cause the business to change. Therefore, the goalpost is moving. It's a moving target. Therefore, your gaps also have to be, your plans also have to be continuously re-evaluated with those changing goalposts or the different changing needs of the organization. Okay. Types of tests, we'll quickly look at it. Now, a plan review is simply a desk review of document accuracy. That is the lowest level of rigor. You're studying the document, right? And you're reviewing it, sitting on a table reviewing it, right? A tabletop exercise will include more people, typically all the roles that are defined in the business document. So let us imagine this, right? We have all the people, say 10 people, 12 people, including the business owners, facility managers, IT people, maybe a representative from the senior leadership, maybe a representative from the internal audit committee, sometimes even a board member, right? You sit in a room, you have a business continuity plan, you project it on the screen, and you say, okay, when this happens, who will do what? Somebody puts his hand up, I will go identify. Okay, and then I'll see, okay, this is a genuine thing, it has happened. Now we have to kick off the plan. I will then call this person, then I'll go to this area, I'll tell them this has happened. Please start the process of that you have been trained on for this disaster. I will declare the disaster, which will kick off the disaster recovery plan. Right, then what will happen? Oh, another person puts his hand up, I will do this. Another person puts, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. Somebody is making a note of all this, right? Does everyone know their roles? people will come and go, right? And then of course you'll have to train the new people on what their role is in the disaster recovery. That is a tabletop exercise. A walkthrough or a simulation is where you try and see, okay, now if this has happened, a simulation is what exactly we do a fire drill in, on most of us who are working in organizations. In slightly mature organizations, you know what you do when it's a fire drill. Fire drill is a simulation. Simulation is anything you do without actually lighting fire to the office. Now, how would you do IT drills? Typically, IT drills, I'll give you an example in India, because people who are in India who are in the field may already be aware of it. For those who are not, I'll tell you. The stock exchanges are required to have hot sites, which means they are completely replicated. Banks in India are expected to be required by law. So I have experienced this myself. For example, the stock exchanges will send us an email. I think a month earlier, 2 months earlier, they'll send us an email. They'll tell us that okay, on this date, we'll be switching our processing to our alternate site, and they don't tell us where, and rightly so, because that should be confidential. For alternate site, and what they do is at the appointed hour, they bring the main site down and they bring the other site up, and they test if the other site comes up, and they test if, and this is actually live trading happens during that actual trading. It is not that those trades are lost. No, traders are actually sitting, people are buying and selling equity or during those tests. And what do? They test if the backup facility has all the latest trades from the previous trading session. Then what do? They check if once they bring the main site up, does the data replicate from the backup site to the main site? Then they test everything, then ensure that replication of data is working across. This is a proper simulation, right? A parallel test where you can have two systems running and see if you are able to switch between the two alternatively. A full failover is production traffic is fully switched to recovery side, which is what I also explained to you just now, in the case of a stock market. Now, these terms, except for the top three, right? Top three are where you're not actually doing a technical test. The bottom two are actual technical tests where you're actually causing that to happen, but in a slightly more controlled environment. You're not just going and pulling the plug, right, on a system or like setting fire. So what if this happens? How do I switch my processes to another company? Now, I'll give you an example, and there's a very good example. Many years ago, I think it's what, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I used to work with this IT services company in Delhi, India, and they told me, right, the American Express, Amex, American is the company. They had a deal with this IT services vendor. They would say that we need the ability that we will call you at any time, and you have to set up some, I think, 50 or 150 computers, and we will give you an address. Of course, they had an agreement that the address had to be within a particular kilometer radius and all that. And they had an annual contract with them, and Amex paid this IT company a certain amount of money. They would call, the company would be given an address, and they were expected to ship whatever 50, 150 computers and set them up, and their performance would be ranked. Right, they would be measured. How much time did you see? What systems were up? Were they working? What state or what is the connectivity? All that would be checked. There would be an observer from Amex in that facility and saying, okay, I'm calling this vendor. Let me see how much time he takes to respond. These are all examples of how they are testing in case they have to move their operations from one facility to another. Okay. What are we looking in the audit is that tier 1 or mission critical systems, which are determined by a business impact analysis of identifying the most critical system which will have the maximum impact on business, should have completed at least a parallel test or a full failover within the past 12 months. Okay. Oh, that scared me. Sorry. Tabletop only is insufficient for critical systems. If you find that critical systems only doing tabletop exercises or walkthrough simulations or only reviews, not good enough, you should have a technical test. Okay. If you are attending if you are able to attend a, sorry, excuse me, guys. Oh, this is one advantage of an online remote session is that I can't pass this on to you. Thankfully. Okay. Please look beyond the pass or fail. Capture the following evidence. Is the test scenario realistic? Are recovery steps followed from the document plan, or are they improvised? Now, improvisation is not always bad, right? We don't need to be a stickler for plans, because improvisation can give you, can give you an improvement. Always. Of course, improvisation is an improvement if it works. Okay, so remember that improvisation is not always bad. Are the right people in the room? Is the incident now roles? Now, we said that roles form part of a business continuity policy or a disaster recovery policy. Are all those people in, are the right people in also? Are the right people involved? And those right, whether they are right or not, you will be able to assess by observing what they do. Okay. Yeah, is anyone saying something? I can't see. If you raise your hand, guys, you'll have to unmute and ask if you are saying something, please. Because I'm looking at a full screen.
Sir, Pradhaman here. Just talking about the previous slide, what is the parallel testing, and what is the difference between the parallel testing and the failover, full failover testing, sir?
Okay. Now, I'm trying to think of an example for you. I gave you an example of the stock market. Did that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Made sense, right? So, main site, bring down the main site, bring up the backup site. All the work happens on the backup site, right? Bring down the backup site, make sure all the data is there on the main site. Right? Whatever are there, however they replicate their data. One site is working at a time. Okay?
Okay.
Now, there might be scenarios where the main site hasn't gone down completely. There is a partial loss, right? And then you have to bring up the parallel site, the recovery site, in parallel with the main site, right? And you may migrate, maybe not. Maybe you have a recovery site because your transactions volume has gone up for some reason. Flipkart, big billion sales. I have a backup. Of course, they do on the cloud. They don't keep infrastructure locked up like that. It would be dumb to keep that for 2 years sales, right? Parallel running is two sites or two instances. It can be two different sites. It can be two instances within the same building, the same city, different cities. Any combination is possible. But you bring up both and you see if they are both running, if they are able to communicate to each other, if they are both serving your needs. That's all it means. Now, as I told you earlier also in one of the slides, these are not standalone or exclusive of each other. You may find that in the real world, there is a combination of these things happening. These are always mentioned in presentations like this, in courses like this, in classes like this, so that you are given an idea of how all you can test it. Now, it doesn't mean that these are all individual separately done. The walkthrough and simulation, could also have a parallel test or a full failure or a cutover. That could also happen. A simulation could have a parallel test or a cutover also, or that simulation can only be a tabletop exercise. Right? Now, simulation in case of a fire drill, you will say, do I have to set fire? No, you don't set fire. However, if you know that in your organizations, like in the organizations I worked, we would have fire training drills. Okay, outside in a safe place, we had a big park in our office, open area, assembly area. There would be a secure area created. They would throw some old clothes, some wires, everything, and they would actually light fire to it. And we could go and use a fire extinguisher and douse the fire, learn how to use a fire extinguisher. That is also a simulation. That's not an actual event. That is also a simulation. Just a fire drill where your alarm goes off, you're walking, that's also a simulation. There is no fire there. So understand that these terms are not written in stone. Okay, these are different scenarios that you may need to implement for different, even for the same disaster at different levels. Every disaster moves at a, it's like a curve. Once you identify that a disaster is happening, it might become more and more severe on that curve. And then at every point you are doing something to address that disaster. Then at some point, as you are addressing the disaster, the severity of the disaster will come down and then it will become zero. Right? Typical, right? You fix it, it'll get better and better and better, and then it is no longer a disaster. You are now business as usual. At each point, as it gets worse, as it gets better, is your response the same? No. Your response to it is also changing. Yeah. So the recovery that you apply at each point of the disaster, as it gets worse, as it gets better, is also changing. Any of these you may have a parallel test and then switch to a full failover. Right? You might say, oh, listen, something is wrong here in my main site. This is going to go down. Bring up the recovery site quickly. It is running in parallel. Okay? Bring it up. Check all the data. Quickly bring it up. Bring up the recovery site. Yes, it is up, sir. It is up. All the data is now synced. The latest data. Okay, bring down the main site. So what have you done? You have done a parallel test, right? That all the data is there. I am being able to bring up my parallel site or my parallel processing. That parallel site could be in the same building in a different rack also, or on a different floor, same room, same rack. Anything is possible. So understand the concept and the principle. So I brought my parallel because I see something wrong. Now, disaster always doesn't mean that the building has gone down. It could be something that some component of a system has gone down. Please bring up the recovery side. Let's switch to it. Right? I can keep this running for another, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes without that component or with lesser capacity. Quickly bring up the recovery side. It's running in parallel. Whatever, 3, 4, 5 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, could all be different. Shut down the main site. Let's do a full failover or cutover. So you have done all of them. Does that answer your question, sir? Does that help?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir, hi, this is Vijay over here. I just have general doubts here. So while auditing, like for example, if the DRP policy is not being reviewed by the senior management, and parallelly the DRP was not conducted for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Which will be the findings, sir? Because the point is here is that
both are findings. Both are very important. So not only does senior management need to approve the plan, they should understand the plan. Because when it actually happens, if they haven't understood, who is going to get it in the neck? The poor people who are executing the plan. Correct? And who is going to suffer? The business is going to suffer. And who will be accountable? The senior leadership will be accountable. So for their own benefit, they should understand the impact of those disasters.
so which will be coming to priority, sir? Because DRP, we should check the effectiveness. So,
Listen, the most important, see, we always say that the order of importance, governance comes first. What is governance? I explained what governance, typically 3 components. Laws and regulations, any standards that you have adopted, plus your own policy. Who is responsible for the policy? The senior leadership is responsible for the policy. What is a policy? A policy sets the intent for the rest of the organization to follow. It sets the intent of the senior leadership. It defines the risk appetite of the senior leadership. How you respond to disasters will be based on what can happen to your information assets. What is the probability of those risk events happening? And to what extent does the law allow you to take a risk? And then what within that provision of the law, what level of risk is the business leader, senior leadership willing to take? Okay? Does that make sense?
yes, sir. Thank you.
So you always start with the governance. Always. Where did I put it? Here. See, in the order, if you see, first is the plan and then is the execution. First two are plans, right? And then is the execution. Always remember that. Governance and then management. Management implements the vision or the intent of the governance. So those plans approved, understood are most important. Okay. After the test, please use this as evidence if you are part or look, right? Sign test report with actual versus target. RTO and RPO. RTO and RPO are extremely critical for all business. Again, disasters are not just that the building is fallen. One computer going down, one server going down, one data getting corrupted. They're all disasters for an organization. You have to list out all those things that can happen and build protection for those based on how much impact of RPO and RTO the business can take. What are the list of issues, deviations identified during the test? The observer, as I said, there should be an observer. You might, in your role as an auditor, may be an observer, for which you have to understand the business, understand the system, understand the criticality, understand the impact on business, understand the plan, and then be able to see if the plan is being followed or if the plan is appropriate for that system whose recovery is being tested. Okay, screenshot and logs confirming system recovery, attendance list confirming key roles were present. Somebody is absent. Why? Oh, he's on holiday. There should be a provision, no? If that person is on holiday, is that a critical role? It will be a critical role. That's why he's mentioned there. There should be an alternate for that role. You can look for that. Or that person is busy having a smoke because he knows it's a drill. Not good enough. Okay, management review and sign off of test results. Now, sign off of test results should include room for improvement as well. If the organization will not let you observe a test live, request the unedited test log and compare timestamps to the plant procedures. Simple, that's all you can do. Then you're doing a post-facto check. But if you're an internal auditor, you might have occasion to observe the execution of the disaster recovery or business continuity plan. Okay. I've included sample evidence. We have spoken about most of this. I have given some sample recovery time. You're not necessarily correct. Your organization, other organizations may have different ones. I have given you some examples of what kind of tables you can create by comparing the plan to the actual test. Take a screenshot of this. I leave it. I don't know if GISA Council will share this with you. I'll certainly share them with them. If you think this is useful for you, you can request them for this. Yeah, make sense? Okay. Again, we have spoken about this. Key interview questions. Important thing as an auditor, you have to be a listener first. Guys, is it okay if I continue for a few more minutes? We are 4-5 minutes past time. Is it all right? If it is useful.
Absolutely, sir.
I
Absolutely.
think it's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Please go on.
Okay. If it is useful for you guys, only then. Okay. So the questions you can ask IT people are: walk me through exactly how you would recover whatever is the system. Right now, if it goes down, what will you do? There are 2 points to this question. The first point of the question is that, is this person able to, of course, it depends on the role. That person has to have a role in that, right? How quickly is he able to either tell you what his role is or what his job is in that particular disaster of that particular system? Or he's able to listen, I need to find this document quickly and this document is here. I'll be able to tell you what exactly to do. That is also a good place to be in. But if the person says, listen, I don't know. I think I have to refer to some document. I have to ask someone where that document is. That disaster recovery plan ain't gonna work, baby. It's a goner. At least that person. Now, most of us, now there is so much. Now, so example, yesterday I was listening, somebody asked me, sir, what are the 93 controls of ISO 27001 NHRA? I said, I don't know. I said, now I'm able to refer, I go and do one query on the internet, I'll get everything. Why should I unnecessarily cloud my brain, right? I'd rather have things that I need to do immediately. To use, I'll keep them. So similarly, with an IT person, listen, this plan is there. It is there on the cloud. I know how to access it. I have the credentials. Give me a minute, I'll access it. Good enough. Then you ask him, listen, if your computer is dead, what will you do? Right? Sir, I have my phone. Here, I can access it from my phone. Here, I have OneDrive or I have Google Drive. I am able to access it. Great. At least you can access it. Then are you able to find your role in it? Yeah. How much time does it take you to find this? 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes. Is that good enough? Assess it. And then you can make an observation. Okay. Where is the recovery runbook? What is a runbook? Runbook or playbook? I think this runbook or playbook term comes from sports, maybe even American, where they would say, you must have seen those football diagrams. If the offender goes here, the midfielder will go here. If the offender goes here, the our front or defender should go here. That is a playbook. What do you do? Step by step by step. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, it does a run playbook. Where is it? I mentioned that. I won't repeat it. Can you show me the current version? How old is the version? If it is more than 2 years old, not good enough. What was the last actual recovery time you achieved in a test against what the plan requires, against what the business requires? Again, the plan may not be appropriate or good enough for the business. What would you do if the recovery site was also unavailable? Have you provided for that? Right? Or is that a risk the business is willing to take? What is the probability of that happening? Recovery site, like we spoke about on this slide. Right? What if that doesn't work? Have you thought of that? I explained why asking business process owners why it is important to ask them if they understand the impact of any systems going down, what their role will be in the recovery. No IT team can recover any system successfully without the active involvement in the recovery process of the business teams. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Okay. Ask senior leadership. I've already told you the question. Important thing is not that if you have reviewed, if you have signed, most places you will find them signed. Do they understand it? Tell them, sir, I found that in your business recovery plan, if this system goes down, and it's a high probability that this can happen to a system, this is the impact on the business. Do you agree with this impact analysis? Do you have any questions for me? Can I ask the IT or the business person to come and explain the impact of this? If the manager says, yes, I understand this, that this system will not be available for 2 hours, and I understand that, they'll have to recreate this information, and we are kind of happy with it. Can we do better? You might get a question like that. If you get a question like that, you say, yeah, you might be able to do better. We'll have to ask the business and the IT teams. It might require more investments. It might need a change of architecture of your systems. Right? That now is a proper, constructive, educative, illustrative, informative discussion that you had with senior leadership, along with maybe the process owners and IT. Now you have helped the organization by bringing those 3 critical components who will actually drive business continuity on to one understanding. And as an auditor, better than your audit report, getting them to an understanding is the biggest role that you can play. I don't have time. If I discussed this disaster in my CISA classes. Excellent example of how IT, senior leadership, and business owners came together, worked together to recover from a major fire in our studio facilities. But we will talk about that. But you'll have to buy me coffee for that. Okay. A strong finding of any gaps in any report, but certainly in a BCP DR report, requires what is the condition that caused that plant to be activated or kicked off. That is the risk condition or the disaster condition. What was the event? The criteria, the cause, the consequence, and recommendation. Okay. Now, finding is that, for example, actual recovery time exceeded the targeted recovery time, assuming that the targeted recovery time was acceptable to the business, and the unavailability of full working systems for that period of time was understood and acceptable by senior leadership. So RTO exceeded by 60% means it was worse, right? It was 60% more than what it should have been, right? Then that is a critical risk. right? Then what is the consequence of that? That prolonged outage exceeds maximum timeout. So then the business probably cannot withstand that failure. It's not the business will go down. No, it's that it goes beyond their ability to recover, which means they will have a lot of backlog. They will have a lot of catching up to do, which may have its own issues. Now, for example, in India, for example, GST invoices have to be filed. Every time you raise an invoice, you have to file the GST invoice with the government of India. Now, I don't know. I'm sure there are some provisions there. What if my system goes down and I have to recreate the invoice? I'm sure there will be some provision there. I'm not aware of it. Now, why is that provision there? Is because the GST teams also realize that systems can go down, data can get lost. They may have to recreate the invoice, right? There will be some provision within a certain period of time. You can do it. So this combination of these four things. Now what you are saying is that on the left hand side, if you see actual RTO exceeded target RTO by 60% during last test is a kind of a technical description, right? The business description is that there is a revenue and reputational loss, potential for revenue and reputational loss. What is your recommendation? Root cause analysis of why the RTO exceeded, update the plan and retest within 6 months. 6 months can be 3 months, can be 1 month, depending on the criticality of the system. This is a great way of attaching a schedule to your great format, because this has the technical part or the gap identified. This has the risk rating also. I have shown high. If you see here specifically, one is at the bottom. I was hoping one of you would ask me, why shouldn't the highs all be together? Yes, keep them together because you want them to focus on the high risk rated observations. Okay, last slide, guys. Now, this is a good, I think, overall strategy to conduct a business continuity or DR audit. I have just included all the points, a summary here. Start with the day one document request list that I had added in one of the slides earlier. Observe or review the most recent test report and run the paper plan checklist. You will have your first finding within hours. Right? Does that make sense? We are done, sir. Any questions? I can take a couple of minutes.
Yes, just one question from my side, Nick. This testing, and thank you so much for this detailed, comprehensive presentation. This testing, DR testing, where exactly should it be performed? Should it be performed in a live environment, production environment, or in a?
Great question. Oh, I understand. Now, again, it depends. Depends. Where do you conduct a fire drill? Have you been part of a fire drill, ma'am? You have been, right? In your organization where they ask you to walk out, go to the assembly area. Yes?
Yes.
Now, where is it? That is performed in the office. Now, let's say the disaster I want to provide for is a ransomware attack where my data gets encrypted. That's also a disaster. Database got corrupted. My server failed, so I'm not able to access my data. That is also a disaster. How do I test it? I have backup, I will restore it. The backup will take time. The backup will be not last seconds backup. It might be 24 hours backup. Is that good enough? How do I test it? I will restore my backup. I will try to use the files. I'll try and see how much time it takes me without disturbing the production system. Production system has not gone down. You are continuing to work, but the business continuity team is saying, okay, I'm setting up another server or system. I'm going to restore the data into it, into that, and I'm going to be working on that. So I'm going to simulate if my main server goes down, how much time does it take me to restore, create another system, restore the backup, start working on it, catch up with the backlog. How much time does it take me? That is another way of doing it. So you're not necessarily doing it in another facility, right? And as I said, don't consider the disaster that the whole building is gone down. Somebody may have deleted a file. That could be a disaster. depending on how important that file is. Now, in most organizations, unfortunately, if the CEO loses a file where he or she has his his household expenses, that will be the most critical file that needs to be restored instantly. The whole database of the ERP can go down, that won't matter as much. Yeah. Now, what should your business impact be? Your business impact analysis should show that one person's file is not as important. Yes, Jignesh, that's true. I've been a CIO and CTO for too long. Yeah. So, since 1996. So that's a long period, right? I was till 2024. 28 years I've been a CIO, CTO, so I have faced this. So I asked this question in my last class. Let's say this example that I gave you of a factory where that computer at the gate went down, which caused a 3 or 4 kilometer accumulation of trucks waiting to bring their goods in. At the same point, another desktop that belongs to the CEO goes down. Which one will you address first? The person said, of course, the CEO's desktop. I said, no, the impact on business is more of the gate computer. Please go and fix that. Of course, that is a joke. So, do I call you Manoko? Manoko,
Yes,
is that
yes.
awesome. So where no names, getting them right is very important, and I have a really bad name, memory for names. I don't remember them. Today I was in a class today. I kept calling Shivani as Anjali for some reason. For 1 hour, I kept calling her that. So yeah, so the testing depends on what disaster you are providing for. I give you the example of the stock markets, right? Where they had an identified day, they would shut down their main operation. They would switch us to their backup operation. That's a different city altogether, right? You want to test if my database goes down, my ERP goes down, my file. If I delete a file, if I overwrite a file, how will I recover it? Right? My company's balance sheet is in an Excel file. What if I overwrite with wrong information? That is also a disaster. Your building is intact. One file, one row, one column, data is changed. That is a disaster. Okay? So testing will depend on that. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I have a question. Can I take 5 minutes of yours?
Ask everybody else. I am here.
Yeah, I'm Swetarak. What I would like to know is, while doing the audit, do we have to see if there is any scenario-based testing is done?
Very
If yes,
important. Very important. What do you mean by scenario?
say,
Give an example, sir. Give an example, sir.
yeah, what I can recollect is a network, outage is a scenario.
Very good. Can I give you a real life example?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So in this organization I worked, we were based in Mumbai, which is on the west coast of India. There was a important service, highly critical service for live news. I worked in television news most of my life. That was hosted in AWS in UK region. All my traffic was routed through the west coast of India. India has at least 2 links I know of, out of Mumbai on the west coast and out of Chennai. I'll come to you, sir. Just tell me, finish. Okay. To the east. So 2 ways to connect to the world. That west undersea fiber got cut. Okay. We could continue to access the server in the UK, but it was terribly slow. Right? Now, none of us had understood the impact on business of that slow working. Right? Then what did we do? We called up the telecom provider. I said, listen, we are dying here. What should we do? They said, sir, we have a service called priority routing. We asked them, what will they do? The priority routing, we will dedicate bandwidth for you from the east fiber. I immediately approved that. It got added to our link in 2 hours. Right? Now, this is an example of actually a network that wasn't going down, but was just terribly, unusable. So then adding that priority routing as a control for mitigating the effect of the west undersea fiber getting cut. This was the scenario.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Correct. But how do we test or at the operation level, how do they test, or how, while doing the audit, how should we ensure that, that is being tested? Say network outage, how do we simulate that? Or it could be a ransomware attack.
Again, it's so many things you can't simulate like a ransomware attack, right? Like I use the example of a fire.
Fire, yes.
Right. Now, what are the best things to do in case of a fire? We know.
Correct.
What are the best things to do in case of ransomware attack?
The first thing to be done is unplug the network cable.
No. No, it is not. The first thing that is your response to a disaster.
Right.
But what is the control that you need to minimize the effects of that disaster? Is data backup. Effective data backup.
Yeah.
So you test whether the data is backed up appropriately, whether the data is restored and tested, and is that restored data usable, right? That gives you protection against ransomware. Now, if you are taking a backup every week, you might take a backup every week, you might take a backup every day, you might take a backup every hour, you might take backup of every transaction, depending on what is your tolerance. How much data are you willing to lose? You had a ransomware attack. How much data are you willing to lose, which will decide how old your backup is. If your backup is 1 week old, you will have to recreate 1 week's data, correct? Now, in an organization, there will be data sets which it's okay to lose 1 week's data, we can recreate it. Some data sets will be, no, we can't lose even one transaction. So you have to set up synchronous replication. Every transaction has to be written to another site so that we don't lose anything. Make sense?
Correct. Yes.
So not everything you fire drill, you want to light fire to your building every time.
Definitely no.
Yeah. So the same principle, so which is why I'm saying I'm trying to focus on principles. You apply the same principles of what we use in a fire drill to any IT disaster. You will answer your question. Yes, sir. You have raised your hand. 2 people. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I hope that helps, sir.
Yeah, greatly.
Yes, sir. Please go. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Kenfak, Kratian, Kenfak.
Please, I have some question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, two parts. Yes. To the first part, I suppose that when I have BCP, when I'm running BCP, I have to choose a process that I know already. How can we choose which process we will go to run in BCP? And if we are in some organization that
The
processes
processes that very simple, very simple. The process which have the maximum impact when if something happens to them is what you should definitely test.
Okay. If we say that they have a most impact, it means that I have to build first the matrix of impact.
So the organization should have conducted a business impact analysis, understanding what those processes are, what those systems are, what their information assets are, what their data is, what can happen to them, right? And what is the probability of those events happening to them? Then estimate the potential impact on business. And then you will be able to know which are my critical processes that I have to address. Yes, Aratla Kalyani. Did that help, Mr. Kenfak?
Yes, very good, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kalyani, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please. I can't hear you. Please go ahead. Yes, Ashwini. Please go ahead, guys. Unmute yourself and ask. Please unmute yourself and ask. Anyone? Ashwini and Aratla, Kalyani, you have your hands raised. Do you have a question? I can't hear you guys.
Oh, Aya, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I just have a quick question considering the recent situation where there is some war is happening, right? You said the business like analysis when the project was initiated, there is no much risk they have identified and they
Yeah.
don't feel that BAU is not required, BCP is not required. Now
Yeah.
the situation comes arise that they have shut down the operations for some time. In these cases, how do we ensure that BCP, previously they didn't recognize, but how do we ensure this should not be happen? How do we make the
Again,
business be aware this?
again, back to basic principles. Perform business impact analysis.
Yeah.
Understand what is the probability of that event happening? What is the event? What is the probability of that event happening? It can happen once every year. It can happen once in 10 years. It can happen once in 15 years. Understand the potential impact on business, then address it.
Okay.
Right? You might say, listen, it happens once it's the first time it's happening in our lives. I don't need to provide for it. One company will say that. Another company might say, listen, now this damn thing is going to happen every 2 years. Now, so let's have an alternative.
Yes,
that is why two companies in the same kind of industry, doing the same kind of business, having the same kind of processes, may have different risk appetites.
Got it. Yep.
Now, in the case of the Indian stock market, for example, the regulator insists that every stock market should have a parallel processing live facility. You don't have a choice.
Exactly.
Make sense?
Yes. Thanks, Aya.
No problem. Yes, Aratla Kalyani, I'll give you 30 seconds to ask me a question. Otherwise, I am exhausted. I'm going to sleep. Anyone else? All right, guys. I hope you found this useful, and I hope to meet some of you along the journey. I do this, I think, once or twice a month, so please join in.
Thank you.
If you have any feedback, please give that to. I look forward to your feedback. Suggestions for improvement are always welcome.
Thank you, sir, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Good night. Good day. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.